know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your host, Justin Hensley, and joining me today, while Dylan is on assignment in Paris, France, we have Dr. Good Friend Cory filling in for him. Cory, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Justin. Happy to be here as always.
And this is your continued efforts to replace Dylan as the full-time host of the podcast.
Yes, I've actually alerted the French authorities. He is presently detained. He might not make it back.
He's going to have to join the French Foreign Legion and then go fight in, Monaco? Yeah, Dylan is on vacation, so I'm here, and I thought, well, who better to replace him than our usual fill-in correspondent? So let's see. I'm trying to think. When was the last time you were here? Was probably
I was here at Christmas, I think.
Was the best of stuff, right?
Best of, and then I think we tried to figure it out at that point. I think I was on once last year, but yeah, not for a while.
Yeah, I think you filled in last summer too when Dylan went on somewhere. I don't even know where he went last year, but
when I tried to replace him that time.
Yeah. So yeah, always good to have you here. I think you were even suggested in the Discord as the fill-in. So I was like, yeah, why not? If you're free, let's do it.
It's a known thing, yeah.
Yeah. Before we get into anything, if you head to patreon.com, that's where you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. And last week, while Dylan was out of town, I recorded a solo podcast under the Comps That Made Us series that I'm doing. And I'm talking about Statements from the Green Planet, which is a Christian rock music sampler from 1997 that I had as a child. And looking back at that, so that as of recording, I haven't recorded that episode yet, but the notes I've taken on it were pretty fun. And you get all of our bonus audio that way. If you sign up at our $5 tier, you get your name said on the show every single week. So let's shout out our producers. So thank you to Dave Brown, host of the podcast One Band, Five Songs. Thank you to Steve Long, host of the podcast Rebel Rock Radio. Thank you to Jason W., writer of the newsletter Songs About Chocolate and Girls. And thank you to Zach in Oregon. I don't have a funny little quote this week. Anyway, we appreciate all our producers. So you also get access to an exclusive producer bonus audio where we next week will be talking about Off With Their Heads Hospitals EP. And then you can join at the $10 tier where you choose the album we devote an entire episode to. So that's all there at Patreon. Link is in the description. So let's get into it. So I gave you the year 1993. And before we get into the record that we are talking about today, we've covered this year a few times in the past. So I'll run through those. In episode 268, we covered Swerve Drivel's Mezcal Head for our My Bloody Valentine's Day Shoegaze special. Episode 256, we covered FYP's Dance My Dunce. That was a Patreon-sponsored episode by Johnny Three Toes, a.k.a. our Madball Mystery Caller. Episode 218, we did Quicksand Slip with Casey Iodine from Iodine Records. In episode 204, we did Seams, The Problem With Me. Episode 176, we did the Smoking Popes Get Fired. We did that with Steve Long, one of our producers. Episode 136, we did Propaganda's How to Clean Everything. We did that with Drew of the band Dry Socket. In episode 84, we did All's Breaking Things with Dave Brown. And episode 45, we did Seaweeds 4 and Babes in Toyland's EP Painkillers under our old album and EP format. So we've hit 1993 quite a few times. So when I gave you this year, there was one record that you said immediately that this is the only record you could remember specifically coming out in 93. And that was the Rancid self-titled record.
Yeah. And I feel like I've been jokingly, but also not jokingly threatening for years to make you seriously grapple with Rancid's catalog. I think eventually you're going to get to an Outcome the Wolves, and I'm going to have to be the guest at that point. I just didn't want to talk about the Rancid self-titled album. It's not very good from 1993. You know, maybe if it was Let's Go, I could find something to talk about, but I don't know. Even when I was a more active Rancid fan, I still never really enjoyed self-titled 93. Self-titled 2000 is a different story. I'll talk about self-titled 2000 any day.
It's very annoying they have two self-titles in their discography.
they're doing the Weezer thing.
Yeah. We did cover Life Won't Wait. I think we did that with Adam Yo. That was a really fun episode. That record is super long though. It's like,
oh yeah, it's so long. It's
over an hour long.
That's their Clash album.
Woof. Yeah, I forgot how long that was. I mean, there was good stuff on it, but it was just way too long. But yeah, Wolves is inevitable. I do think
we'll get there someday.
Yeah, we'll get to it eventually. I'm sure a guest will choose it. Dylan and I were actually talking about this last week, how there are still so many albums and artists that we've not done on this show that it's just, we've done, this is episode 329, and there's still so many big records we've never touched. So
that was kind of why I chose what I ultimately ended up choosing today, is partly because it's an album that I don't know, I think is going to be a little bit tricky for me to say much about, but also is maybe not a genre you guys have explored very much. I don't think you've ever done anything else by this artist. Mm-hmm. And like really, aside from a few jokey options on the list, there wasn't really much on there that I felt prepared to talk about. I told you really quickly before recording that I did briefly consider making you talk about Primus's Pork Soda, a CD that I owned at one point, and I don't think I've ever listened to the whole thing. I think pretty quickly after buying it, I realized it was awful. But the reason that I bought it was because I bought it really early into my music buying life. I probably bought it when I was 12 or 13, and my family was living in California at the time, and I would walk to and from school every morning with a friend, and every afternoon. And on the way home, we would pass by a Blockbuster Video, and Blockbuster Video was right next to this Starbucks. And so on the way home every day, it was probably about halfway through our walk, and California is obviously hot, and we would get really sweaty, especially on our walk home, stop in at Starbucks, ask for a free cup of water, and drink our water really quickly, and then make this like disgusting concoction of milk and or creamer and cocoa powder and cinnamon from their little like lid and sleeve and coffee stirrer station. And we did that until eventually they asked us to stop doing that. And then we'd go to Blockbuster, and at the time Blockbuster also sold music, and the Blockbuster music section was very strange. You couldn't really buy much, and what you could buy was like just these like strange Castaway albums. Like this was at the time when nu metal was really big, and you remember that band Orgy? Mm-hmm. So I bought an Orgy CD there, but it wasn't the Orgy album. It was a CD EP of Blue Monday remixes. It was horrible. Marilyn Manson was also big at that time, and they didn't sell they didn't sell Antichrist Superstar there. This would have been like 97, 98, around there. Again, they had this like strange EP. I think it was the Smells Like Children EP. Just odd choices. Anyway, they had Primus's Pork Soda, and I had $9.99. I had some money I'd scrounged up, so I bought Primus's Pork Soda there.
And like, how long into listening to it do you think you got?
Well, at the time, like I was definitely still forming my musical identity. I always say that I got into good music and then got into really bad music, because I've probably even told this story on the pod before, but I had this guy in my class. I moved to California when I was in grade 7, and immediately met this kid who had like a floppy mohawk. He looked so sick. He was a skateboarder, and he wore this shirt almost every day. It was a Fury 66 shirt. Fury 66 was the Southern California, just like hardcore skate punk band. And he gave me a cassette version of Nevermind the Bollocks, and just like sent me on this punk journey. And then like weirdly, I backslid into nu metal and got really into Korn and Limp Bizkit and tried to get into Primus. But really, like I had no understanding of what Primus was. I had just seen, this was the era of like writing bands' names that you loved on your binder or on your backpack or whatever. And there was this nu metal kid who I looked up to, who I must have seen Primus written on his binder in a whiteout pen. And And so I bought Pork Soda by Primus.
Yeah, I had one of those guys in my middle school. He had like Korn and all these different like artists like written all over his notebooks and backpacks. And yeah, that's how I became aware of like Korn and a lot of the new metal stuff that was getting on the radio around that time period. So yeah, it was we all kind of felt, if you were a certain age, you fell into the trappings of new metal because it was very present in pop culture, and we were young enough that like we don't have good taste yet, really.
Yeah,
like
just unavoidable.
Yeah. So yeah, I do think everyone at roughly our same age group fell into that same area, because it's the people who are a little bit older who are already into like punk and hardcore and that kind of stuff are like, what is this trash? And then like, I guess the younger kids, they come into stuff a little later than us. I don't know what younger people think of that kind of music, but it had progressed, I guess, enough to your Linkin Parks and all your butt rocks of the 90s. But yeah, very particular time and place.
Yeah. And then other than that, I mean, I'd be curious to know what your experience with what else is on this list. I know you said off the top that you've already covered a bunch of albums from this year. Two things kind of stood out to me as I was looking through this. Just like overall, not really a year. Like there's a lot of recognizable artists on here, but aside from some of the big ones, like I think number 2 there, PJ Harvey's Rid of Me. I think that's one of her classics. In on the Kill Taker. I think that's fairly well regarded in Fugazi circles. Icky Metal, Archers of Loaf, kind of the classic. But then when the further you get down the list, there's a lot of recognizable bands, but not necessarily their most well known or best albums. So that kind of stood out for me. And then the other thing was, it was making me think of, maybe just to build on this other conversation of like people you look up to. It was making me think a little bit of the importance of just like punk elders in general. It's like passing down knowledge and how that has like mattered at different points in my life. And one of the things that was standing out for me in this is that I recognized a ton of these albums because when I would have been in my probably like early 20s, I was teaching at the time, and there was a dad of one of the children that I was teaching who he and I became friends, and he was probably at least 10 years older than me. So, in 1993, I was in grade school. I was still young. Those would have been his teenage years. Like 1993, he probably would have been like 17 or 18. And so a ton of these albums I have heard because he would just bring in these huge stacks of CDs for me, and I would in return bring in big stacks of CDs of things that I was into, because he wasn't necessarily keeping up with as much new music. But, he was a full-grown adult. He had a job and a family and other things to do. So he was sharing with me these formative albums, and that's definitely the only time I've ever heard Polvo. I remember that was the first time I had heard Archers of Loaf. Just looking down this list to see what else. That Quicksand album, Slip, he gave that to me. The Seam, I don't remember what Seam sounds like. There was a Hum album on here, I think on maybe page 2, that down here on page 1, that he gave me or loaned to me. Tad. All these kind of like he was definitely into like noise rock and math rock and kind of that more like sludgy side, that post punk. Yeah, a ton of these albums I recognize from him. So, I haven't been in touch with him in probably 10 or 15 years, but shout out to Yasser for giving me all these these weird albums from 1990. Six Finger Satellite. Yeah, I recognize a lot of this stuff.
It's funny you mentioned like the Polvo record, the Seam record, the Archers of Loaf. There's like a Superjunk record that year too. So that dude was like way into like the Chapel Hill scene, specifically indie rock scene.
Yeah.
Those are all Chapel Hill bands. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, and those all would have been big when he was a teen.
Yeah, and that is my favorite Superjunk record. That's On the Mouth, was released that year, so that's a big record for me personally. It's funny, we have talked about when we've done this little like stretch of time. It's like 93, 94, 95. 94 is known as like this really big year for punk, especially in the mainstream, because you have Dookie is released that year, Smash by the Offspring is released that year. There's a bunch of other stuff from that year that was pretty widely available in a lot of people's first punk music. But it's funny that on either side of that are not that strong as far as like big records. There's a couple things that you mentioned there. There's a Big Bad Religion record that year too. But you're right. It's like once you kind of get away from like the handful of really well-known albums, you start running into like a Bad Brains record. Rise was that year, when they became a metal band. You get like, I mean, there's a decent, that Goo Goo Dolls record's pretty good. Superstar Car Wash, I like that record. Kind of leads to them having a bigger mainstream footprint. But yeah, like going through this, I see a lot of names that I don't even know what that is. I'm not familiar with Only Living Witness or
Dog-Faced Hermans. You don't have a pass with Dog-Faced Hermans, the 14th most highly rated album on this list.
Yeah, that is a name I only know because of this website and looking at this website all the time, because I know no Dog-Faced Herman fans. Like, who listens to that band besides the users of this website? I don't get that at all.
What about Yegor I Opis Denevshi, which is listed as a psychedelic post-punk poetry and noise rock album?
Oof. I'm gonna pass on that.
Should have made us do that.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, just pick like the weirdest thing that you're like, let's listen to this hair and skin trading company record. I don't think it's gonna be good, but we should find out.
We have to listen to it on YouTube only.
YouTube rip only. I mean, to show you like the strength of 1993, on page 4, we're already running into bands like Arc Welder and Iceburn as being like, man, any other year, like a bigger year, those would be like page 10 records. They're not the most popular albums, but
yeah, I don't know who those bands are.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, there's a Leatherface record that year. Minx came out that year. I do enjoy that album quite a bit.
There's a Seaweed album.
Yeah, that's the one we covered a long time ago. Yeah, there's decent stuff, and like every single year has good music. Like
there's a Flipper album that I've never heard of, American Graffiti.
God, I hate Flipper so much.
I think we've talked about that before. That first Flipper record is so good.
I get what people like about the first Flipper record. We did the second Flipper record though, and that was one of our earliest episodes where we just hated the album, and then we got negative reviews from it because we didn't like the record. It's like, it's an opinion show. You don't have to give negative reviews for opinions on albums, but
well, Did you ever get into Unwound? I was surprised at how high up this Unwound album was.
Yeah, I never got into Unwound. I mean, they have some stuff that's decent, but I just never connected with them. And I should, because it's a style of music that I technically would really like. There's just something about it that I never could
like the idea of Unwound. Unwound is one of those bands. I've got a bunch of bands like this, but Unwound is one of those bands that when I read about them or I read an interview with them, I always think, oh, this is something that I would enjoy. And then I listen to it and I just do not enjoy it.
It's funny because like the style of music it's like this post-hardcore. There's some screamo sort of in there too. The people who are the target audience for that kind of music aren't really Unwound people though. Unwound to me seems like they always appealed to the more just indie rock crowd. Like the people who are into that kind of stuff would like them more. They're always the ones who are talking about them. And it's just like, I don't know any Scrams kids who are listening to Unwound, even though it's sonically not that different, just better produced,
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't get Unwound. I get what people like because the ingredients are good, but yeah, just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Well, doesn't
a little bit. Well, just scrolling through, I'm just like, I don't think we really need to talk much more about this year unless you just have, burning thoughts about Big Daddy Multitude by Mustard Plug.
No, I'm good.
Well, let's get into the album that you did select for us to talk about. So I gave you 1993 and you selected Dropdead by Dropdead. AKA, this record has a few different names. So it is sometimes just called Dropdead, sometimes called Dropdead 1993, because they are a band with many self-titles in their discography. Or it is Otosu Shi, which is roughly translated from Japanese to Drop Dead. So it's Drop Dead in Japanese, is basically what the kanji on the album cover is saying, which I find very funny because they are all white guys. But
all white guys who were very influenced by Japanese hardcore.
That is true. That is true. There is a big influence on, for sure. Drop Dead were from Providence, Rhode Island, and they formed in 1991. This record was released on Selfless Records, and the personnel on this album is Lee Mastrobuono on bass. Apologies. Brian Mastrobuono, brothers, on drums. Ben Barnett on guitar, and Bob Otis on vocals. And the record was recorded by the band and Don Fury. So we'll have a backstory. We'll get into it in a little bit. But what made you choose this album for us to talk about? Mostly
because I feel like in our conversations over the years, and maybe this is just my perception of it, but we've had a lot of conversations in passing about hardcore, and I feel like you think that I don't like hardcore, but I do like hardcore. I just only like very particular kinds of hardcore, and I love Drop Dead. I was a little worried beforehand that I wasn't going to have very much to say about this album, and that may still be true, so we can just kind of talk around it. I don't think there's really much to say about the album in particular. I love Drop Dead. I love Drop Dead in almost all scenarios. Drop Dead is amazing running music. If I want to go for a fast run, I'll throw on Drop Dead. If I'm doing some cooking, I'll throw on Drop Dead. If I'm driving somewhere, I'll throw on Drop Dead. I love Drop Dead.
You're kind of like Dylan.
And I don't know if we'd ever talked about that.
I don't know that we have. I kind of remember talking about something related to crust at one point, but I don't remember how in depth we got. Are there any other crust bands that you were particularly fond of?
That's a good question. I don't think I ever really thought of them as a crust band, though. Also,
I mean, they are. They don't consider themselves crust, but no band ever considers themselves the genre that people call them. They're just like, we're just a hardcore band. It's like, you're more than just a hardcore band.
Well, okay, so I think when I listen to them, I hear more of that like late 80s and early 90s American hardcore, Siege, Infest, Crossed Out. I don't know. Do you think those are crust bands too? Maybe.
Yeah, kind of. I do, yeah. I mean, some of them, I guess they're technically power violence. Because this record I've seen tagged as crust, power violence, and D-beat. D-beat, I guess, goes back to Discharge.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that is like a retroactive thing. But I think Drop Dead's influence on crust is very obvious, like what they were, who was influenced by them.
For sure. I'm definitely not. I'm not disputing the lineage. I'm not disputing the influence. I don't know. I just never really thought of them as a crust band. But to answer your question, yes, there are some crust bands I like.
I was gonna say, is there a big differentiation to you between crust and what Drop Dead are doing here?
Well, maybe it's because when it comes to hardcore, and also maybe just most genres too, I'm less interested in being restrained by genre and more interested in just finding bands that excite me. And when I think of the term crust, I think of stuff that, like, in general didn't really do it for me. Like, I don't like Ausrotten. That's what I think of when I think. That's the first band that comes to mind when I think of crust is Ausrotten. And I don't think Ausrotten and Drop Dead sound alike.
That's fair. I do think that there's...
So musically, I think that I would agree with you that, like, again, absolutely, there's some crust influences. Vocally, I think, is where Drop Dead is differentiated from me. And vocally, I think that is more in a lineage of Japanese hardcore. Bob Otis has talked in interviews about being more influenced by bands like Conflict, Crass, and Japanese hardcore bands, Gauze, in his delivery than crust bands.
I wonder how much of that is timing, because I don't know how many crust bands there are prior to this time period that you would call crust, because a lot of the stuff that he's influenced by is Crass, Conflict, that kind of stuff that eventually becomes like the template for what crust does later. So it's a weird distinction. I do think that Drop Dead are a band that people who don't listen to crust also like, that maybe don't really care about like amoebics or nausea or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't really care about. I like some nausea, but I don't really care about amoebics.
Right. Yeah. I mean, are Dropdead are a butt flap band in the sense that you would see them on a Crust Punk's butt flap, but
But
not
the
every
banders themselves, I don't think are butt flap crust punks.
They're not. No. The one's got he's like a mental health professional. Like that's his full-time job.
I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah. It's true. They do not really embody that crust lifestyle, despite being influenced by the bands who created the template for that, which is funny.
Dropdead probably smell okay when they stay in your basement.
I suspect they do. I suspect they are not a stinky band. Do you remember when you first got into Dropdead? I keep saying Dropkick. That's a Scottish like jangle pop band.
I was definitely familiar with them prior to this, but I think, and this is maybe something else also we can talk about, very cool. Their album art is great. Their merch is great. And probably first tapped into that because Lauren Donitzio from The Measure and Warriors used to wear a Dropdead shirt all the time on stage.
That's kind of funny to me. That because The Measure and Warriors, like musically, are not similar at all to what Dropdead's doing.
They're far away from Dropdead, yeah.
But politically, socially, there's actually probably a lot in common there. Yeah. My personal experience with Dropdead just consists of me just listening to them one day out of the blue, probably looking at this website, Rate Your Music, and being like, I should listen to Dropdead. And I listened to this record and thought, that record fucking rules. So that's my Dropdead experience.
Yeah,
I don't have a big crust.
So this is why I don't. I mean, it's kind of just like lost to memory at this point. I don't remember in what order this happened, but at some point, I was doing a lot of record trading and buying online, especially in like the early to mid 2000s before like online pricing just became kind of flattened out because of Discogs. You used to be able to more readily, find people who needed to move and needed to get rid of a bunch of records before moving, or needed to make rent and needed to move a bunch of records before the end of the month. And I built up so much of my record collection that way. And I remember finding someone probably on Viva La Vinyl who was getting rid of the first two Dropdead LPs and the Dropdead Look Back and Laugh split, who's another great band too, who with Look Back and Laugh, it's always kind of confused me how they ended up being a dollar bin band, but maybe it was just because too many copies were pressed. But I loved Look Back and Laugh.
Yeah, I don't really know too much about them, just their name.
Yeah, so I would have come into a Dropdead collection pretty quickly. I probably found them for $7 or $8 online, and shipping was cheap at that time too.
Yeah, it is not cheap anymore. Nothing's cheap anymore though.
the fallen world.
Yeah. Well, let's run through a little bit of the backstory on the band. So, like we said, they were from Providence, Rhode Island. This is their debut full-length album. Prior to this band, Bob Otis placed flyers in a few local record stores in Providence in 1989. And Brian and Lee Mastrobuono, God, I cannot say that name. I don't know why it's so hard. It's Buono at the end. But they both saw the flyer and contacted him. Then Bob gave him some tapes on the kind of stuff he wanted to play. Very much inspired by Anti-Semex, Crass, Conflict, Gauze, Infest, Siege and all sorts of other in that vein. And
the
they took
band
this tape-
itself was named after a Siege song.
Right, that is right. From like 1984, their demo tape, yeah. And they decided, okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's start a band. So they add Ben Barnett to the band, and his intention is to be the singer. Bob is going to be the guitar player, and Brian was going to play bass. Lee was not in the band yet. So they're searching for a drummer, and they can't find one. So Brian winds up playing drums and bass, kind of switching back and forth depending on who they could get to, hang out with the band and play. They kept telling Brian, it's like, you can't play drums, so you should go back to bass. So that's why you would keep going back to it. They start the band and they call themselves Hello Cost, which is really, really great. And eventually they reshuffle everyone in the band and they add in Brian's brother Lee to play bass. So even though Brian couldn't play drums, he wound up being the drummer of the band. Ben switches from vocals to guitar and Bob switches from guitar to vocals. So they all traded instruments at that point. They changed their name to Dropdead in 1991, and their very first show is opening up for Born Against and Rorschach. So that is a wild first show.
What an incredible first show.
Yeah. And then prior to the LP, they just released a series of demos and live recordings. They're all labeled self-titled. There's one that's a split with a band called Swirlies. And I was like, no, not that Swirlies. I think it is that Swirlies. Like they're like a current, like kind of like jangly, like almost shoegazy band that's like still around. Very, very funny to do a split with them. And so the record comes out on Selfless Records. That's a Texas-based label that at that time had released the Jawbreaker Jawbox split, the Dag Nasty compilation 85 to 86. There's some Screeching Weasel 7 inches and that Ramones, I think it's a cover album they did. They did some Down by Law, some Queers. Not really the kind of label that does this kind of music, so it's kind of interesting to see them on there. And like I said, they recorded with Don Fury, and he's famous for producing tons of New York hardcore bands. Agnostic Front, Burn, Went Away, Project X, Shelter, Sick of It All, Snapcase. This was recorded at WRIU, which was a college radio station in Rhode Island. They probably used it because it was cheap and a college station. I wonder if they even paid anything to record there. They probably just knew a DJ. And it's a studio, so it's probably got good soundproofing. But the album was released on CD and vinyl. The CD version is actually a different mix. It's the earlier, rougher mix of the record, and the vinyl is like the final, more cleaned up version. I'm not sure which version is the one that's on Spotify. If I had to guess, it's probably the final mix because the CD version has like extra songs. It's like another like 10 songs on there, and they're not on the streaming version. CD version also combines the songs Do You Choose Life and Deliver Yourself as a single track and ends with a live version of Still You Follow Blindly. So that's another reason why this is probably the vinyl cut, because it's the studio version on the streaming. And there's an interesting liner note in the CD that the band says they don't know how many copies of this album were actually pressed on vinyl and CD. They suspect maybe 5,000 combined vinyl and CD. Mm-hmm. Because it was distributed by Dutch East India Trading, and they claim that the label ripped them off by pressing and selling copies after they stopped getting a percentage of the pressings. They do say in the liner notes that this is just their opinion because they had someone at the label tell them that no, that's not what happened. But their reasoning is the CD just began appearing again 5 years after they were out of print. So it's like, so either you found a box, quote, that's the old trick a lot of labels do too. Just do an extra pressing and say you lost the box and found it. Mm-hmm. They think they got ripped off. Who knows really what happened? Not impossible to believe, but yeah.
Also, as far as your question around which version is on Spotify, both of them are on Spotify. They remastered it in 2020, but I think they remastered it based on, I don't know, someone's going to get mad at me for this. I think they remastered it based on the earlier mix.
Yeah, I wonder which one did I listen to? Oh yeah. Which one did I listen to?
You can tell the difference.
Oh, I listened to the one that's not tagged remaster. So yeah.
Yeah, that was a little sludgier sounding.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll also add, like, have you listened to a lot of Dropdead?
I think I've listened to the second album as well.
Yeah.
The Untitled, I think is what they call it.
It's also self-titled.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. It is listed as Untitled. They rename their stuff a lot,
Yeah, and they've got, they re-release things. They've got 2 discography LPs, one only covering 92 to 93, and then one covering 95 to 2013. I would imagine at some point there'll be a third discography LP covering.
Yeah, they seem very, very on it when it comes to like keeping their music in print and so that it's easily accessible, because it seems like it's always available to get.
Yeah, and at least since I think the late 90s, they released their own things on Armageddon label, which also Ben Barnett owns the Armageddon record store in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Which is the home of the label. Yeah,
I think Selfless kind of stopped being a label in the late 90s, so it would have made sense. They just started doing it themselves, pressing it themselves on their own label.
Yeah.
It got reissued on HG Fact in Japan and Coalition Records in the Netherlands, but those are the main versions of the record, the Selfless and the Armageddon label in the US at least.
Okay. I mean, as far as Dropdead albums go, this one isn't my favorite. There's only 3 to choose from, but I usually reach for self-titled 98 more often, and I also really I love all of their albums, but yeah, 98's the one I usually go for, or the second discography. Dropdead 2020 is great too, and really interesting to listen to in succession and kind of pick up on the different eras of the band. Yeah, I don't know. One of the things that I really like about them is that they are still going and are still remaining relevant and interesting. They sound just as punishing in 2020 as they did in 93, even with the kinds of changes. There's definitely a different vocal style, but it's probably got to be really hard to be 30 years into a band and shredding your voice like that.
Yeah, you talked about it earlier that this is kind of a hard record to talk about. One of the big things is this record features 34 tracks and it is 23 minutes long, which I think it said that there's no song over 2 minutes on this record, and if there is, it's only like 1 or 2. It's when I saw that, I was like, 34 tracks, holy! I was like, is this bonus material? And then like, no, it's only got a 23-minute runtime, so this is the record. There is bonus material on later versions, but
you and I both love a short album.
Yes, we love a short king. We love those records that are sub 30. It's so good. Perfect album length. 30 is like max, and 35 is like the max okay length. Once you hit like 40 minutes, you're like, unless it's like something with like 10-minute songs, it's like meant to be really drawn out and long. Like, yeah, we don't need 40-minute records.
No. And I would probably feel very differently about this band and about this album if it was 34 2-minute hardcore songs.
Yeah.
I'm fine with 30-second songs.
That is the problem with like talking about this record as tracks. Like, you talking about songs on this album is really kind of pointless, because so much of the album sounds the same, but also a lot of the songs are just, it's 1 or 2 riffs, and that's the whole song. There's not a lot of parts to a lot of these songs. Now, that being said, the songs that do have like 2 or 3 parts to them are kind of the ones that stand out the most to me, as far as just like, well, that's interesting. They did, something a little bit more involved than just like straight ahead, the same 3 chords and some blast beats,
Yeah.
So yeah, this isn't a record where we're going to go like, oh, what's your favorite song on here? Like, none? All? It's like,
yeah, the answer is kind of all. I take it in as an experience.
Which the band also kind of does, because there is a version, like a really recent repressing version, that the entire album features 2 tracks, and it's like the A side and the B side are all 1 track as a single track. So it's kind of, the band is like, yeah, it's one big piece of music, really, which is really the only way to do it. Because I was telling Dylan, like, this is the record we were talking about this week, and he's like, oh, that's a great record. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about the songs. He's like, it's all about the vibes. It's like, it is true. It is very much like the overall feel of this album is what you're talking about and listening to and enjoying, is this energy.
Yeah, if I want to run really fast for 24 minutes, it's perfect for that. I was doing it last night.
Yeah, it's an easy album to listen to. Like, that 34 tracks, like, ignore that. Like, don't even think about how many tracks are on here, because it's 23 minutes long and it flies by. It flies by in a sense of it's not that long, and it flies by in the sense that the songs are super fast. In literally every way you can fly by a record. This is what it is.
talk about album art and just the aesthetics of the band for a minute?
Yeah. You brought that up before we were talking about what album you wanted to do, and you said you really want to talk about their aesthetic. So yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, black and white collage art in some instances. What's the name for that photo technique of like, I don't know what the word is, because it's not necessarily that it's a black and white original, but it's like you like turn the contrast all the way up. That's the word, contrast. Yeah, I like that they approach their overall art with a sense of aesthetics in mind, with the sense of consistency in mind. It's kind of like vaguely unsettling, like fascist landscapes, just like a foreboding sense of the apocalypse.
Yeah, like looking at pretty much their entire discography, it's almost all black and white. The version of this record that is most common is like kind of like a blue. It's like a blue tint to it. I'm assuming it's just on blue paper, but still black and white. But there are other versions that's like it's just more of just gray or black and white on white. But yeah, all of their artwork has that similar look to it. I mean, that definitely comes from their influences, like Crass did all the black and white stuff. Conflict in the 80s had a lot of black and white stuff.
Yeah.
Discharge has a lot of that too.
It's Gauze.
Yeah, Gauze. Yeah, it's a visual style that I feel like if you're familiar enough with the genre or this particular style of hardcore or crust or power violence, you can see the album covers of these records and go, I think I know what that sounds like without ever having heard a second of it.
And especially on the album we're talking about, on Self-Titled 93, it's got, as you say, it's got the Japanese lettering on it. Just kind of, positions it within a lineage.
Yeah, because it's bigger than their actual name underneath. Being influenced by Gauze is probably why they went with that kanji cover. I was looking up some like translations, and other translations were like Death to Fall. That was like the Google Translate. I saw another one that said Struck Dead, and then I finally saw one that just said Drop Dead. So it kind of has multiple meanings. Those three phrases also have multiple meanings too. But yeah, like visually, it's just a cool style. It's part of that lineage of who they're influenced by. They then in turn influence future bands. Is Tragedy's entire discography the same way? Like all black and white? Let's see. Yeah, they're all black and white. I don't think His Hero's Gone. Yeah, theirs is all black and white too. I'm thinking of what's the other one? From Ashes Rise. They have some color in their album covers. A little bit different.
Those are crust bands.
Yeah. But those bands were like 100% inspired by what Dropdead were doing. To me, like I listen to those records and I hear Dropdead.
Maybe I don't know. I'm not going to get this distinction right, and it's probably going to annoy someone who pays more attention to this kind of stuff. But
you're on the band side.
For me, I think it's helpful in that I don't like metal, and so I don't like metal influenced hardcore, and I see crust as being more influenced by metal than the Japanese hardcore, the late 80s American hardcore.
I can see that. Yeah, there's definitely other influences in there that give that metal tinge. I feel like that's more of just like it's a metal influence and not necessarily like a genre of metal. Yeah. Like to me, it's still a hardcore subgenre.
Yeah, I don't mean that I think Tragedy's not a metal band to me.
Right.
But vocally, I think there's more of a connection to metal than to what Dropdead is doing.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely feel like all those bands were listening to Dropdead though, for sure. Lyrically, I was looking at, kind of what's their messaging. They are pretty consistent with the type of messaging on here. They are very much an animal rights band. I think the whole band's vegan. There was a interview I read with a couple members, and it was either like Bob or Ben. Someone in the band was like, there's 3 B names in Bob, Ben, and Brian in this band. And they're all the permanent members because they have replaced Lee a couple times. But I think one of them said, like, I always make sure we have one healthy vegan meal while we're on the road. Like, the band dad is just like, all right, I plotted out our meal for the day. We're going to go have this nice dinner at this vegan restaurant. And then one of them was like, I love curry. So I always want to eat curry.
Have you ever seen them live?
No. Have you?
No, I should.
They're still active. Like I don't think they ever stopped. Like there's a period where they're like less active, but
I think they've played Toronto a couple times, but probably not when I was near enough to see them.
Yeah, they will play festivals, but they are also kind of picky about what festivals they'll play. Like if it's like a super, commercially supported festival, they won't really do it. Like they refused to do Scion Rock Fest. I don't know if you remember that one, because they were like,
That one?
we don't want to play under a giant Toyota banner. Was kind of their thinking. It's like, it's fair. It's fair.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that falls in under a lot of their other aesthetics. Besides from like the animal rights stuff, like they are an anti-fascist band. Like they have songs on this record that are like specifically talking about fascism. Like there's the song Clan. There's the song, what is it? Nazi atrocities. There's the song Bosnia even. They're an anti-war band, but they're also like they're anti-fascist in the sense of like, we're not gonna kneel, we're not gonna, lick the boot, which I think is a message that still resonates very strongly in 2025, maybe more so than the last 4 years. But yeah, going through it, I was like, man, they do borrow a lot from the Crass and Conflict, like lyrical style, because Conflict was a big animal rights band too, and they also sang a lot about anti-fascist themes. And it's hard to really get into the lyrics because it's not like, a lot of the songs don't have a lot of lyrics. Some songs have like 3 lines in them. It's not the kind of music where like you're really going to be impressed with wordplay or anything like that. Yeah. It's the lyrics are like a blunt instrument.
It's messaging.
Yeah. It's getting across a belief more than specific lines.
I read an interview with Bob as well that was kind of talking about their approach to putting it together. That Ben will kind of put together the music, come up with the riffs, and kind of assemble it with the band, and then Bob comes in later and will record it, and then kind of sift through his notebook and see what he's got that might work around what the band has put together, which is kind of an interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to write lyrics, but yeah, I guess it's a case of what do I have written, I think Dylan writes that way. I think he's a lyrics first and then make it fit the song type person. Yeah. They're like separate things, like writing the lyrics in a vacuum, writing the music in a vacuum, and then kind of putting them together. It happens a lot in hardcore too. But yeah, it's because there's not like a verse chorus format to most of their music that, you don't have to, we need a hook here. There's not really hooks on this record. It's a pretty straightforward, just kind of like, here's a bunch of sick riffs just kind of stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, and hook is probably not the right way to think about Dropdead and what they do. And on future releases, like on 98 and on Dropdead 2020, even musically there's more clarity to what they're doing. Like the mix is fairly muddy on self-titled 93.
Yeah, they also liked the rougher earlier version of the album too, so the version that's on Spotify is probably the cleaner version, and it's still not that clean of a record.
No, there's only so much you can do going back.
Yeah, it's definitely a record that's like, it's not for everyone. Like if you don't enjoy fast-paced, hard, loud, angry, can't understand the lyrics, very buzzsaw sort of guitars, just like this nonstop thing, it's probably not for you. But if it is, I think this really does stand out as an exemplary album in that particular style of music. Just this.
Yeah, and I think that if you're into hardcore, you're probably already familiar enough with Dropdead and what they do. Like I can't imagine we're reaching any new ears today with this. But I think something you said earlier was interesting, just to go back to that. Yeah, they seem to be one of those bands who people who, myself included, who wouldn't say that they are active listeners or people who pay a lot of attention to hardcore. Dropdead finds a way in.
Yeah, I feel like Dropdead is they're a band that like people you wouldn't expect probably like Dropdead too. I mean, I guess theoretically, well, not theoretically, but like you're technically someone who, from all your appearances on the show, we've not done anything like this, I don't think.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I don't think we've done a hardcore album.
No, and I think the closest we were going to do is like you were gonna do an episode with us in our old format where we talked about like a Trap Them EP. And then for some reason something came up and you couldn't do it, and we just did the episode without you. But like I think that's the closest we ever got. Because even any best of lists you've ever done, I don't think there's been much hardcore in there.
Not usually.
Yeah. Dylan doesn't like talking about a lot of hardcore either. His reasoning is he doesn't think it's easy to talk about, which I somewhat agree with that. As far as a big chunk of what hardcore is like the riffs and the overall feel instead of not even lyrics always. Sometimes lyrics are important. Like this one is a good lyrics record, but yeah, hardcore can be tough to talk about. I don't envy those podcasts out there that only talk about hardcore records. I imagine those are also people that only listen to hardcore or primarily listen to hardcore. So it's probably easier for them to talk about that kind of stuff than
Definitely. Yeah. Easier than we had today.
Yeah. Because it's tough to talk about this, especially this kind of hardcore too. You know, I would have the same kind of problems talking about, I think I did have same problems talking about like Tragedy when we did an episode on them. It's it's an overall feel. I mean, you can look at the total package of everything: art, lyrics, design, aesthetic. But yeah,
I think we touched on all that today.
Yeah, so I guess we can run down what else they did after this. So they have tons of splits. Like there are so many splits out there by Dropdead. Let's see, notable ones would be the Totalitar. There's a Converge one. They do a lot of splits with bands I don't know, like Rupture, Crossed Out, Unholy Grave. Like I don't know a lot of these bands. Brain Oil, but lots and lots of splits. Like they have a lot, which explains why they need these like discography collections to get everything together. But they did release another record in 1998. That is the second self-titled LP, sometimes called Untitled, sometimes just called Second LP. Then they released a third one in 2020 called Dropdead 2020. There's a funny version of this record. We talked about this on the episode we did on Starflyer 59 for our Valentine's Day episode. There's a misprint version of the record where the A side is the A side to the Dropdead album and the B side is the B side to Starflyer 59's Gold. I love when that happens, like a misprint. Like there's another one that happened like that. There's like a Lana Del Rey one.
There was a famous one with a Beyonce album, I think.
Is that another one? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny when it happens. It's clearly, you can't tell what plate it is just by looking at the grooves. So like I see how it happens accidentally, but it is funny. I guess it's just that was the next one in the pressing order, and that's how you got that plate mixed up. Copies of that exist with the B side is like scratched out. I guess that's just to show that it's it's junk. We're supposed to throw it away, but some people snuck some copies out. This record was inducted into the Decibel Magazine Hall of Fame in 2011. So
congratulations.
There's apparently like a giant 7-page interview. It's only in the print version of the magazine. It's not online. There's probably a scan of it somewhere, but I didn't go looking through, for scans. But I would like to read that because it talks about this whole record. It's probably fascinating, actually. 7-page interview about this one record. Yeah, I bet there's stuff in there that we're missing. And this is the only record that Lee plays on. He does appear again on a 2018 Flexi 7-inch, but he gets replaced by Devin Cahill for the band's next LP. And yeah, still active today, still playing. They're all professionals. One interview I read said that Bob is a mental health professional. He'd been doing it for like 15 years. I don't remember what year that article was written, but it's probably closer to 20 at this point. I think, is it Ben who runs the record label and the record stores in Providence? And the article I read said that it's like Brian and George are unemployed at this time, which was funny that they were just like, it's like, well, this article is going to be around forever. So
I hope they found their way.
Yeah. Hopefully they're not still unemployed, but George Radford winds up replacing Devin Cahill in 2010 on bass. So they had 3 bass players in the band. But yeah, it's a great record. I mean, that's really how I would sum this album up. Just an excellent album, front to back. It's fun. It's angry, and in times like these, it's really satisfying to listen to. I think help get out some anger and some frustration. I don't know. Do you have any last thoughts on the record?
No, I feel similarly. I think they've kind of talked about that in interviews. That probably like most people who find their way to this kind of music, that it's an outlet for rage. It's an outlet for feeling out of sync politically, and yeah, I think you should spend some time with it if you haven't heard it.
Yeah, it's definitely an important record. Like I think it's a really important album that it doesn't feel like it's anything that's like aged. Like it's aged well is what I mean to say. It's this type of hardcore tends to age well in general. The message is the thing that tends to not age the best, but this record's pretty good as far as that stuff. I read through all the lyrics I could find. There's a couple of songs that didn't have lyrics online, but nothing in there that I really found like problematic. Conservatives might find some problems with a lot of the lyrics, but
well, they can just get to the punk then.
Yeah, they listen to punk, but they don't pay attention to what any of the songs are about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing really problematic, which was different because like Conflict did have some problematic stuff in their lyrics, later lyrics, not necessarily like the ones we were talking about at the time. Though actually there were like slurs in one song on that record, but it's one of those songs. You know how all the punk bands in the 80s have songs with racial slurs in them because they're like playing characters in songs that are racist, and it's like,
yeah,
like Jello Biafra, we didn't really need to hear you use that word, you know.
No, we get what you were doing, but
right. You're not the one to do it with the word, you know.
It hasn't aged well.
Yeah. And they were smart enough to not do anything like that in their lyrics. So. And even their animal rights songs, like I've definitely heard more aggressive animal rights songs that are definitely more, they seem to be more focused on like the factory farming aspect of it and the fact that you're just taking a life. But there are some that
there is a song on the album that equates vivisection, testing on animals, and the treatment of animals in general to a daily holocaust, which may be problematic.
Yeah, that's I mean, their band name initially was called Holocaust, so that's another. Yeah, that is one thing that you see hardline vegans use that a lot, talking about like, oh, it's a Holocaust on animals. It's like, I know what you're saying, but they're very specifically different.
Yeah.
Yeah, the racial undertones aren't necessarily there when it comes to animals. So.
Yeah.
There's some speciesism. If you want to talk about that, that's worth talking about. But
here we go. We can find better words sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, just because we chose, like, you know, as a society that some animals are okay to eat and other animals are not okay to eat, it's funny that humans do that. But
cool. Well, I don't have anything else to say today.
I don't either. And I guess like this Dropdead record, this will be a little shorter episode than normal, but
that's okay.
Yeah. Crust and hardcore
close to an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, this is before editing, so we'll see what comes out. But well, I guess that will do it then. So I appreciate you coming in and filling in for Dylan.
I'll be back next week.
Yeah. Anything you want? Yeah. I didn't realize what you said there for a second. Is there anything you want to plug? Is there anything that you?
I've got nothing I need to plug.
Yeah. I was trying to think if there's anything specific, but you're a little more private than most of our guests. You're not out here trying to shill your wares and.
No, I'm getting really into posting upsetting AI videos and upsetting animal videos. So yeah, if you want to find me on Instagram, you can do that.
Yeah, I've seen some of those, and I'm just like, what is this? It's like, oh, it's one of those weird like Mid-Journey.
There's this guy who he makes these really cool videos of like food items eating themselves. So it'll be like a guy made of cake eating cake, and you know, just makes you think.
You know, if it wasn't AI, I don't think I would be like as like ugh by it. I think it's because it's so obviously AI. I think that's why I'm just like ugh. I don't like that.
Absolutely nobody likes it.
If it was a drawing, I'd be like, that's kind of cool art. But yeah.
Look, if people didn't react, I would stop doing it.
That's the trick. Don't feed the troll. So if you want to see that or Dancing Mamas or I forget what else. You haven't posted as many of them lately, but
yeah, they stopped getting a reaction.
All right, then I guess that will do it. So thank you all so much for listening. You can follow us on all forms of social media at punklautopod, punklautopod@gmail.com. Oh, we are still planning on doing a mailbag episode. We've received a few questions and some voicemails. So if you want to send your voicemails or emails, our voicemail line is 202-688-PUNK. And our email address is punklautopod@gmail.com. Or you can DM us on literally any app that we're on. Hopefully I'll get to it. Try not to use the Facebook one. That is the slowest to notify me whether or not I have a message, because there'll be stuff sitting in there for like months and I'll be like, wish I'd known this was here. But yeah, get them on and we'll put it together. And if we don't wind up getting enough for a full episode, we'll just sprinkle them throughout some other episodes. So All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.